Hello and welcome. I'm Bob Lichter, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project for the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I am a member of the Kenosha History Center and have volunteered there since 2015. We hope that you will enjoy these programs. I'm with Chuck Saftig, retired Kenosha County Sheriff's Deputy. Hello, Chuck, and welcome.
Morning, Bob.
Are you originally from Kenosha?
Yes, I was born in Kenosha. I grew up on the south side of Kenosha in the Brassville area, as you want to call it, or Lincoln Junior High area. My dad worked at American Brass. He was there for 41 years. And so I wound up going to Durkee, St. James, Lincoln Junior High, and then I graduated from Bradford High School, 1962.
What did you do after high school then?
During high school, I worked at Robinson Pharmacy, which was a drugstore located on 36th Avenue and Roosevelt Road. I was stock boy and clerk and did a little bit of everything besides that. And then after I got out of high school, I worked trying to find a full-time job. It was kind of difficult, but I worked a little part-time at National Tea, which was a grocery store at that time. And then in August of 1962, I got called at Snap-on, and I went to work at Snap-on. And I worked at Snap-on Tools for 5 years. And at that time, I applied both for the Kenosha Police Department and for the Kenosha Sheriff's Department. Well, I passed both and got put on a waiting list. And I came home from work from Snap-on one afternoon and walked in the door and the phone was ringing, and it was Jerry Sonquist, who at that time was Chief Deputy Sheriff, Kenosha Sheriff's Department, and asked me if I wanted to start on Monday. And I told him yes, I would. So I was kind of excited. Went in, got out of my work clothes and put my civilian clothes, regular clean clothes on, and the phone rang again, and I thought that was Jerry calling me back, telling me he was just kidding me. And I answered the phone, and it was Captain Ralph Fox from the Kenosha Police Department. And he says, "Do you want to start on the police department Monday?" And I told him, "I just took a job with the Sheriff's Department." And he laughed and he says, "Yeah," he says, "Jerry and I were trying to get a hold of you all day." So it was kind of funny. But prior to that, when I was working at Snap-on, my boss came in and said my mother was on the phone. She needed to talk to me right away. So I went to the phone and answered the phone. And my mother says, "Chuck, what did you do?" And I says, "What are you talking about?" She says, "There's 2 FBI agents at the house." I says, "I've got no idea." I says, "They want to come over here. I can talk to them over here, or I'll be home a little after 3. So she says, they'll come back. So I had come around the corner to pull in the driveway, and there's a sedan sitting outside and 2 FBI agents in it. And so I went out to them and I says, "Do you want to come in the house and explain everything to me and my mother?" Guy says, "You really got her shook up, you know." So we went in and they said, "On such and such a date, were you on Bong base?" And I says, I may have been. I says, I was at that time I was dating a school teacher from Union Grove. And I says, I may have been that night. We may have been on a date. Used to park out there. And they says, "Well, did you see anything when you park out there?" And I kind of kiddingly says, "We weren't really looking at the traffic going by." And so they said, okay. And they said that there was Mr. Bernat was murdered out there, and they were looking for anybody who might have seen any cars out there. And so I thought that was kind of funny at the time. And in 1967, when I got hired on the Sheriff's Department, because I was low seniority, I worked half a week in the jail and half a week on the road. And I was in the jail one night booking in prisoners, and the FBI agents came in with somebody, and the one agent says, "You look familiar, do I know you?" And I says, "Yeah, you talked to me about the Bernat murder," which we both laughed about at that time, you know.
And Bong Base, that was a proposed Air Force base
Yes.
out on Highway
And,
45.
Yeah, back in '63, that was under construction out there, and so that was out where Highway 75 is, and Highway now 142. So where Brighton School is, and Brighton Park is out there now.
When you started at the Sheriff's Department in 1967, what was the interview and testing process like at that time?
We had we first come in, they had to fill out an application, and they said, read the instructions, and basically on there was put your name, address, and phone number on there. If you've completed this, you don't have to go any further. And there was a whole bunch of questions below it. Well, that's as far as I went, you know, and I'm thinking, you know, should I answer the questions or not? Well, they were done in about 10 minutes, and they said, well, okay, those of you that did what you were told to do on the paper, stick around. The rest of you don't know how to follow instructions.
Just as simple as that about reading.
Right, and then we had a physical test. Both the police department and the sheriff's department both had a physical fitness test, and you had to run a mile, and I don't know how many minutes it was, and then climb a rope. And there was a lot of people could not climb a rope. And then we had a fence. They had a fence set up. We had to be able to go over the fence, and there were some people that couldn't even go over the fence. So, but I got hired. There was 6 of us hired at the time, and
did you have specific training as a new sheriff's deputy? Or
we
mentor?
rode with a senior officer, and they would break us in on everything. And then some of us were taking classes at Gateway in the police science program, and so rode with. Back then we had 2-man squads, so you had 2 partners, and back then the sheriff's department ran a rescue for the county. Also, they didn't have the individual villages or townships didn't have rescue squads. There was a few on the Silver Lake and Bristol and Twin Lakes had rescue squads, but nobody else. And so we had 2 stretchers in the car and a resuscitator, and we'd go to accidents and load the people up and take them to the hospital in the back of the station wagon. So it was not the most comfortable for the patient, not the most room in there either. But we got them there best we could. And
so instead of an ambulance coming, then you just had the squad car.
1977, the law changed, and you had to have so much distance above the patient if they're on a stretcher, and station wagons didn't comply. So then all the towns and villages had to buy their own rescue squads. At that time, the sheriff's department sent 5 of us to the emergency medical technician school, which was done at Station 4 of the Kenosha Fire Department. Jim Gerlach was he was an assistant chief, and he was a training officer for that. And went through that. It's a very difficult course. Took a lot of practice with everything, but fortunately I passed it. And I stayed active with that when we quit transporting patients for the sheriff's department. I had moved over to Summers, and I went on Summers Fire Department and Rescue Squad and continued my EMT training. And then in 1981, I married my present wife, Susan, and we moved to Pleasant Prairie, and I went on Pleasant Prairie Fire Department and Rescue Squad.
Well, that was volunteer fire department?
Yes. It was what they call paid on call. If you had a call, you got a minimal amount of money for your time. Both departments had some full-time people, but everybody else was a volunteer or paid on call.
When you started with the sheriff's department, is that a union job, a represented job, or?
We had an association, which was a bargaining group for the deputies with the county board. And we started out, 1967 was getting $553 a month, which after I left Snap-on, I took a cut in pay to go in the sheriff's department.
Wow.
But,
And what,
we had to buy all our own uniforms and equipment at that time. And I put out about $500, both for the multiple uniforms we needed and the equipment, the gun, the holster, the handcuffs. Mm-hmm. We had to purchase everything at that time, where nowadays it's all furnished.
at some point that changed, that everything was
Right.
provided? So what was a typical day like then when you first started, when your first days on the job?
Well, we came in, we had what they call tab, which was a meeting of the whole shift, the officers going out. Each shift had 2 different starting times. There was an hour difference, so there was always people on the road. It was never devoid of any patrolmen out there. And we'd go in and they'd read tab, tell us what happened during the day or what we need to look out for, and specifically what area you're riding. Generally, you rode the same area for a month, but things varied sometimes.
And how many deputies were on staff at that time?
There was 55 deputies
Okay.
at that time, and now I believe there's over 100. And basically now the sheriff's department's got the patrol division, and then they also have a prisoner conveyance division, because there's so many. We had, back '67, we had between 80 and 100 inmates, where now they've got 400 or 500, because the county holds federal prisoners besides the county's prisoners.
And back in the 60s, the jail was downtown?
Yes, it was in the what they call the courthouse annex, which was addressed at 911 55th Street. Now it's being used as some offices in the district attorney's office.
Okay. Did you have certain rules you had to follow, work rules that were very strict?
Yeah.
Okay.
No drinking prior to coming to work, and be on time, and obey the laws. I mean, you treated everybody the same, and I think that was very important. It's not like you see in some of the movies where that isn't done in the movies.
Yeah. What about any new skills you had to learn as someone coming in the department to make your?
Yeah, we had some defensive tactics taught to us, and then we'd go to the range, and the range was very important, I think, because if you had to use your gun and shoot, you wanted to hit what you were shooting at, not hit some innocent civilians or shoot into a house or something.
What was that range like? What did that look like?
We had the basement of the Kenosha Police Department on the east side of Sheridan Road there. The building's been torn down the last few months, but there was a range down there, and then when they built the new safety building, we had a range down there, and then we also went out to the Conservation Club and shot out there. So when I started, we carried 357 Magnum revolvers, and generally most of them were either Colt or Smith & Wesson. And then back, I want to say about 1988, then they went to semi-automatics, and then the county furnished all of that. And those were 45 caliber, where now they use 9mm. So.
Did you form friendships or anything with your coworkers socially?
You got socially, everybody got pretty close because you took care of one another, and a lot of times, back when we quit doing the rescue squad work, we went to one-person squads, and a lot of times you needed a backup, and most of the time if you got to an injury accident, you're down there bandaging somebody up, and you turn around and grab something out of the first aid kit, and your backup's handing it to you, which is pretty nice because the guys all stuck together quite a bit.
What about technology from your time?
It's
How did you communicate with other?
technology really changed. Once in a while, I'd wind up dispatching on third shift. I worked a jail and being a dispatcher at the same time. And Wheeling Township probably had the oldest phone system at the time. And if you had a fire, they had a ring down system. You had to call the operator, and then she would ring all the firemen's phones. And when you heard 5 or 6 pick up, then you'd give them the address of the fire call. And then we had the teletypes, which there was probably 15 departments on each teletype line, and you'd fight to get onto the typewriter to type in if you wanted to do a license plate check. We didn't have the computers where you could get it almost instantly. And then they improved that, and they went to a tape, so you'd run the tape out with the information you needed and feed it in the machine, and the machine would automatically take it when a line opened up. And then they finally went to computers, and now the squads can got the computer in the car, they can get the license plate check right in the car, or a record check if somebody's wanted. So it's come quite a ways.
Were you there when they had computers in the vehicle?
No, when I retired in 1994, and they were just going to computers in the squads, so.
Okay. Did any local, national, or world events affect your job?
Yeah, 67 they had the riots, and Racine was closed down. We were up there on just north of the county line, and then a short time after that, we were riding the squad, and we were checking Howard Johnson's, which was a hotel and restaurant that was located on Highway 50 and I-94. And we seen a gentleman walking into the hotel. He looked kind of familiar, and my partner says, "Who is it?" He says, "I should know him." And I said, "Yeah, he looks familiar to me too." So we see what car he came out of, and we ran the plate, and it come back to Father Grappi, who was a civil rights activist and a priest out of Milwaukee. And so, oh, that's who that was. And about 5 minutes later, our sergeant calls us on the radio, and he says, "I've got the FBI office in Milwaukee calling. They want to know the reason you're checking on that car." So then we thought, are we in trouble now or what?
Yeah.
But,
Okay. Anything else around Kenosha Racine that was going on when?
we doing the rescue squad work. We picked up a lady having a heart attack out on the west end of the county. We're bringing her into Kenosha Hospital, and we're coming in Highway 50, and she's on a stretcher behind the passenger seat, and I'm on the passenger seat, bent over trying to do chest compressions on her because there's not enough room to get in the back there. And we're moving along pretty good, and we come over the railroad tracks just west of Cooper Road there. And they were pretty bumpy, and you dropped probably 4 or 5 feet when you got east of there. And I'd come down and bounced, and this lady pops up, and she goes, "Our Father who art in heaven." And so she was breathing then, and we got her to the hospital, and she made it. So it was kind of neat, just really a funny feeling. And then
Yeah.
I looked over at my partner who was driving, and he had a kind of a shocked look on his face. So I don't know if I saved her, or if he did with the bump he took.
A combination of things.
Right.
Did you do any other, side work when you were?
Yeah, I worked as a patrolman for the township of Pleasant Prairie for 3 years, and worked part-time. They had some other deputies working, and they had some city Kenosha police officers working on the department out there. And I also did security out at Wilmot Mountain, which was a ski resort on the west end of the county. And that was quite interesting. And then we did security at the Webco power plant in Pleasant Prairie when it was under construction.
That was back in what, mid-1970s, late 19?
Yeah, 79, 80, 81.
So while that plant was under construction, that was
There was
security.
25 of us working out there, security. They work deputies around the clock there to keep stuff from happening out there.
Was there concern about people coming in and stealing contractor tools or anything?
Yeah, the tools, lumber. They had a lot of lumber out there, a lot of tools. You
What was the best part of being a sheriff's deputy?
know. I thought it was interesting. I liked the first aid part of it because you were helping people, and a lot of times those people didn't forget. And when you had something happening in a subdivision out in the county, sometimes they come up and talk to you and tell you what you needed to know. So because they appreciated what you did, and so.
How about
And
the,
you got to get along with all the as the townships and the villages out there got their own rescue squad going. I got to work with all of them guys, and it's a great bunch of people to work with. You got a lot of dedicated people that put a lot of their own time into that, and so it's kind of nice. And I think it's nice. I think everybody should volunteer for something. And after I retired, I volunteered at the Civil War Museum, and then I was down at the Kenosha History Center, which I was there 12 years, and I had a great time down there. I learned a lot. People coming in that were looking for information, but also told you stories about things that happened within the county here, which was pretty interesting.
do you remain in contact with some of your old co-workers?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We once a month we get together for breakfast, retirees from the sheriff's department, and also get together with some of the old firefighters I worked with, and have coffee and talk over old times and talk about new things happening. So
What about the tough parts, the most challenging parts of being a sheriff deputy?
probably the hardest part, I think, is seeing a child being injured and somebody hurts, a child being hurt seriously, and he hasn't even had a chance to grow up. And that was the hard part, and especially going home from that, and you look at your own children and you appreciate them really more. I was at home one night, and I was not on call for the fire department. As we had set the schedule for the fire department for the rescue squad, but if we had a fire, everybody went anyway. But they toned out the fire department for two boys that were riding their bicycles on a pond by Prairie Lane School, and they went through the ice. And that wasn't too far from my house. So I told my wife, I said, I'm going. And I went, and I got there. One of the boys was already under the water, and the second boy was hanging on to a piece of ice. Well, as I got out of my car, the piece of ice he was hanging on to broke, and he went under. And so I took off my coat and everything, and I went in after him, and was able to find him, grab the hold of him, and the hard part's getting him back and getting him out of the ice, because to get out of the ice, you have to get out backwards. You can't get out forward because your body won't let you get over the ice. And I had to go out backwards like this, grabbing the ice, and pull myself and him out, and got him out, and took him to the hospital. And I went in with them because I was so cold in from the ice water. And they kept him overnight because of his body temperature had dropped quite a bit. And I know after that, for a number of years, he had problems with pneumonia from being so cold. And that night I went home and got in the shower, and I ran out of hot water, and I still wasn't warm. But
Wow. Anything else you'd like to share about your time?
I think a couple things in my time on there. I think a couple things that I think were really great is dropping the blood alcohol level for drunken driving. When I started, it was 0.15, and now it's 0.08, which is half of what it was. And I think that's helped a lot. I think, and then a lot of the improvements to the roads. The biggest thing I think in my whole career was the highway department putting on edge stripes against the edge of the road, because it's reflective, and when it's foggy at night, a lot of times we would get calls on the sheriff's department. It was so foggy you couldn't see the road, but that reflective stripe would get you where you had to go. And right after I started on the department, they went to countywide addressing. So you lived on streets and avenues, and which was very important for rescue squad calls and that, because you knew where to go. Camp Lake had like 5 different lakeshore drives, 5 different subdivisions, and excited senior citizen would call up and say, "My husband's having a heart attack. Where do you live?" "I live on Lakeshore Drive." "What's your address?" And well, everybody knows I live on Lakeshore Drive. "Well, what subdivision are you in?" You know, and we had to try to narrow it down that way, where after they went to streets and avenues, they could give you a house number, which was really beneficial both for us and for the rescue squads.
Okay. Well, we appreciate your story, and want to thank you for coming in, Chuck,
Okay.
on behalf of the Kenosha History Center and Kenosha Community Media. Thanks a lot for sharing your story.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay.